What does a pharmacist do? Well, most people might answer that a pharmacist dispenses the medications that my doctor prescribes. Now, I work with a ton of great pharmacists, and one thing that I don't generally see is excitement about pills in a vial. And this is probably because pharmacists have been trained to do so much more. So what can you get excited about in your community? To find out, let's go beyond the scripts. Welcome back to the Beyond the Scripts podcast. I'm your host, Will Tuft, the Director of Education here at PioneerRx. And so finally, we've had a little bit of normalcy getting back out on the road, and I've been to a couple trade shows lately. And when I'm on the trade show floor, I get to interact with so many different pharmacies of all types. And oftentimes when somebody approaches the booth, they say, "Tell me about your software." And I say, "Well, tell me about your pharmacy." And that's a really great way to kind of get that elevator pitch off the cuff about what independent pharmacy owners really kind of identify their pharmacy as. So a lot of times they'll really focus on that niche that they fill. Well, we do a lot of nursing home, cycle fills. We do X, we do, Y. There's all of these different niches that they have found that they've really filled in their community and identify with. Today, we have somebody who may have a much longer elevator pitch about what their pharmacy does and identifies as, because we have Barry Klein, which I feel like a lot of people who are going to be watching this episode are probably familiar with. You're one of those fixtures that, I feel like people recognize at the trade shows. Hey, there's Barry. Let's go see what he's up to. So Barry, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, Will. So it's always good to see you. I look forward to the Nashville trade show, honestly, to see people again.
Going out, we made it to NCPA recently, and it was just so great to be, out and having those interactions. Another thing you see at the trade shows, aside from just that interaction, is that introduction to so many new opportunities. Every classroom has some amazing, success story with pharmacy that found, a 340B opportunity, a better way to, organize their workflow, their adherence packaging, opportunities. And you at Klein's have found very many of those opportunities and really tied a lot of those different things into your pharmacy. So if you had to give me a pitch on Klein's pharmacy, like that elevator pitch, tell me about your pharmacy. How would you describe your organization?
Well, first of all, we've been in business at the corner of Broad Boulevard and State Road in Cuyahoga Falls for 50 years, over 50 years now. It's been 55. My father started in 1966, and I've been there full-time since 1990. So that's part of the reason I have a long elevator pitch is I've been doing this a while. Secondly is I guess our philosophy has always been trying to find the solutions to our patients. So I think the best way to approach that is when I came back to pharmacy, Clozaril at the point in time was just starting to be dispensed. At that point in time, it took weekly blood draws. It took prior authorizations with the payers. We were one of the very own few pharmacies at the point in time that was willing to do the work. So fast forward, that has morphed into kind of a focus of our business is servicing the severe mentally ill patient population of Summit County and the developmentally disabled population of Summit County. In 2008, my wife, Ann, and I, who's also a pharmacist, we opened up a pharmacy and community support services, which is an outpatient mental health pharmacy in Summit County, serving the moderate to severely mentally ill patient population of our community. That was a great opportunity because it really meets one of our passions of taking care of an underserved patient population. With that, one of the needs they had, one of the solutions they needed was adherence packaging. So way back in the 90s, we started doing adherence packaging. So in 2017, we opened up another pharmacy that was strictly a closed door pharmacy focus on adherence packaging, and we serve group home, predominantly medical at home patient populations, trying to take care of those patients with complex medication needs.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Sorry.
So, no. I was, whenever I have a guest on here, I want to try to figure out what is that thing that they do that no one else does, and you just do so many. So back it up a little bit. The flagship location, your dad opened that up in 66, you said. So did you kind of grow up in the pharmacy? Did you have that kind of like, I didn't go to daycare. I went and stocked shelves kind of upbringing?
Pretty much. So one of my favorite stories is the building we're still in. My father was one of the tenants in the building. There was a beauty shop at the other end of the building, not a very large building by any stretch, but I always had to empty the trash. I always hated going past the beauty shop because of the smell of the perms that all the ladies would be getting at the beauty shop. So I still have very vivid memories of that.
That is, it is funny how those memories can just kind of seep in so strongly, especially when you have those strong smells. To me, Aquanet just still reminds me of my sisters growing up. That's great. So yeah, I've actually made it up to your pharmacy a handful of times. I actually got to spend some time back in my days as an installer in that pharmacy for quite a while. And what's interesting is, you kind of glazed over the fact that flagship location is really kind of that traditional, community hub retail area as well. So there's a lot going on in that one building.
There is. We now have 2 pharmacies in that one building. One's the closed door, one's the retail that has a USP 800 compliant compound lab. So there is a lot going on. We've been very busy with COVID testing, COVID vaccines. You talk about COVID testing. It was a solution that people needed because there wasn't access to COVID testing. And I said, how do we figure this out? Because we had heard that labs, you couldn't partner with labs. So back to our mental health patient population with clozapine, they need blood draws. We contact the lab that we do blood draws with all the time or work with them. Hey, can you do COVID testing? Sure, we can work with you. We can partner with you and get this done. So that's how we were able to provide that solution in our community, and proud of that because people were really struggling at that point in time to get COVID tested.
Yeah. And so again, that's one of the recurring themes we hear is, independent pharmacies realizing a need in their community and then leveraging those relationships that they've built. And a lot of times those relationships may be more, we think more of a prescriber relationship, but you're kind of looking at those ancillary services as like, those are relationships that you've built. How can I adapt those? So it's kind of a neat twist on that story that we hear over and over, but that's really neat. So did you guys do point of care testing ahead of that, or was that kind of your first?
No, we were doing some point of care testing, but at that point in time, it was very limited. People just weren't in the mindset of coming to the pharmacy to get point of care tested, but we were prepared to do it, and to the benefit of some forward-thinking team members that we do have at Klein's.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at one point, people didn't think about going to the pharmacy for vaccinations either.
Correct. And when you look back through time, it's hard to imagine that even being a possibility because we've provided so much access to so many vaccines over the years now.
Yeah, it really seems like that next step, especially, every time flu season comes around and somebody comes into the pharmacy and they're like, hey, I think I have the flu. And you're like, well, go to their doctor. And then they come back from the doctor and they say, well, I had the flu. And they're like, yeah, I figured. But it seems like this unnecessary loop in the system that could have been handled so much more efficiently because the prescribers probably would love to have that offloaded, to that first point of contact when they came into the pharmacy.
Right, right. And we have a collaborative practice agreement so that we can initiate Tamiflu therapy if appropriate. So we can do the flu testing and then initiate therapy if it's positive.
Yeah, that just makes so much sense. So being around the pharmacy from 1966, I'm trying to think. So was your father like really ready to embrace change at every turn, or was he more of the kind of traditionalist? And I feel like we should at least mention his name. I'm not familiar, so
Ed.
Ed, all right. So was Ed the I'm ready to evolve, I'm ready for that new opportunity guy, or was he the just give me my typewriter?
No, he was always looking to evolve. He was one of the first pharmacies in the community to actually computerize. So we computerized in the mid 70s. And
Wow.
I'm embarrassed to say, when I graduated pharmacy school in the mid 80s, my first job with the chain, that pharmacy wasn't computerized.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Mid 80s, and they don't have a computer, and I was having to learn how to do everything via typewriter. That was not fun.
No, I just can't imagine. Just the amount of, billing and administrative work after the fact is just wild.
Yeah, submitting claims. What we went through from submitting claims on diskettes, but at the chain, we were having to fill out claim forms. So it was, and that has evolved so much, thank goodness. You talk about vaccines and the partnership Pioneer has with STC to transmit that to the state immunization sites. It's just tremendous.
Yeah, a couple partners, STC, SMP, really, but like I said, even now, there's still some state agencies that are not all that, technology forward.
Right. So getting back to your question, yeah, my father did always embrace moving the pharmacy forward, and to the point where I think that was part of my upbringing is, we have patients that have problems, we need to find solutions for them. If it's a difficult to find medication, just don't say, oh, I can't get it. Does a colleague have it? Can you buy it from the hospital? What are the alternatives to make sure that we can take care of that patient?
Yeah, absolutely. So that would definitely make sense to make that leap, from looking for solutions to being the go-to for solutions, especially the example you gave, the mental health arena, where your big box stores probably aren't going to put in the legwork, and a lot of smaller pharmacies probably may not be that open to new tasks, to what may sound like could be more work, could be is it going to be worth it? So there's definitely a level of entrepreneurialism, a level of risk, but also, like you said, that there has to be that passion that says, yes, I want to do that.
Yeah,
because
and then naivety, fast forward or fast look back in my career, I just, that's what you did. You just figured out a solution. I hope at this day, 30 years later, would I still do that? I hope I would.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you make that work when you bring in something new, like, okay, we're going to start basically doing lab testing before anybody else is doing lab testing. And at that point, was it still just the flagship location?
Yes.
Okay.
That's our traditional retail site. So the other locations aren't necessarily retail. The one in the outpatient mental health center, it's only for the patient population of that agency. It's a 3,000 patient outpatient facility. So it's busy as it is.
Yeah. So at that point, were you still, the like primary bench pharmacist, or did you have other staff pharmacists at that point?
We always had staff pharmacists. Our as you referred to, the flagship store was a busy pharmacy in the community. So we always had 2 to 3 pharmacists. For the most part, majority of my career that were staffing that location. So yeah, I would staff 35, 45 hours a week and then try to do everything else on top of it. So as I aged, that became more and more challenging, and pharmacy became more and more complex.
Okay, I'm going to stop calling that one the flagship, because everyone at your other stores is going to be giving you a hard time. Oh, Barry must be at the flagship today.
The original.
So, so as you introduce those new things, hey, we're going to start doing lab tests, and at that point, Barry can do that too. So what'd you bring in next? What do you think your next big, kind of adaptation or leap was from that?
Well, in Ohio, with the managed care entities for Medicaid, we're really trying to the provider status. We can do the testing, but the mechanism to get paid isn't necessarily there. So those are the things that we're working with in some of the pilot opportunities that we're participating in. It's like person with diabetes, a chronic disease state. Can we bill for hemoglobin A1C? We can perform the test, but can we get paid for the test?
Yeah.
So those are the questions that we're having now and working through it.
Yeah, there's a lot of those, chicken and the egg, which comes first, and being able to provide those services is great, but yeah, you have to be able to monetize them.
Right, and I try to always look at things from a business perspective as well. I make sure first and foremost we always take care of the patient, so we do what we need to do. And then on the back end, I feel that's somewhat of my responsibility is how are we going to get paid to do this? But I don't want to go full steam ahead if there's no mechanism to get compensated for it either. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and today it's interesting that there are definitely some initiatives, some organization is really what it's going to take, is that being able to standardize and provide in a uniform way. Here's a way to quantify those services. And that's exciting to see with, flipped pharmacy and CPESN kind of moving that needle forward.
Right. And we've made a lot of progress in the past year, I would say. And I'm hopeful for exponential growth of that, because I think with COVID, it has shown how community pharmacy really plays a vital role in individual communities' health, and how do we leverage those resources that we have already in the community. And in Ohio, I want to say the managed care plans have recognized that and really want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, COVID's been if there is a silver lining, it's been great for independent pharmacies to be able to illustrate their value on a larger scale than ever, probably.
Correct.
So,
and some of the other things that we're doing, my wife's very passionate about what we do with our severely mentally ill patient population. Just from the fact that some of the things that we take for granted, adherence calls when people don't have steady housing, places to eat, all those things introduce other challenges. But so what other opportunities can we take advantage to engage that patient to make sure that they feel comfortable, and we're reaching out to them in a means that we can connect to them to keep them on their medications, because a lot of the medications they take cause other disease states. You're dealing with their mental illness. Now they have diabetes, they have hypertension, high cholesterol. So they become a very complex patient that needs to be treated as a whole patient. So, I'm very proud of what Ann and her staff have done at that location from a standpoint of looking after that patient and being that pharmacy that's going to look at that patient, not just from one disease state, but the whole patient.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a little bit. So when you're at the original location, and it sounds like early on you saw that need in the community for assistance with the mental health community, and then you start performing those labs and you start providing more and more emphasis on that. Eventually, that grew into a whole nother pharmacy, but I'm really curious of how you're able to make that work and how you're able to grow that while still keeping your eye on all of the other parts of your pharmacy that were, already a full-time concern, a full-time area of focus. So, did you delegate? Did you have a team member that you made a champion of that early on? How did you, because you have so many different niches that you perform, I'm curious how you really are able to keep all of those just moving forward so strongly.
Well, I think part of it is just understanding I can't do it all. So really I have focused on having a staff of managers at the pharmacy locations. And then I have Dan, who's vice president of pharmacy operations, and he oversees the day-to-day operations of the pharmacy and making sure that we're doing everything we can. He's staffing 2 to 3 days a week as well across the 3 different locations. But it's been vital to build in some infrastructure. And I think that's what I've learned over the years. When I was trying to staff 40 hours a week and do everything else, it's just hard to keep your eye on the ball when there's different balls bouncing at the same time.
Yeah. I remember when I came to visit your location the first time as an installer. And at that point you were only in part of the building, but I think you were beginning the expand to expand into the other part. And I just remember being a bit overwhelmed by the kind of the different sections that you had. So I remember, a nice retail area where you had everything that you would typically pick up at your neighborhood drugstore. So you had that great kind of community experience. And then you had a packaging device. And then downstairs, I spent a lot of time with those Oki Data printers for your pouch packaging.
That was switch.
Me too. Every now and then when I hear an Oki Data off in the distance. So I feel like we're going to need an appendix for anybody who's under 30 for diskettes and Oki Data printers. These are just Googleable. They're Googleable.
We just got rid of our last Oki Data in 2017, Will. So, we were still using them until we installed the new automation and the new closed-door pharmacy we opened in 2017. So,
yeah, they're a bit dated. They still make these Oki Data printers, and they're still exactly the same as they were 30 years ago, but they're solid. They work. And that pill packing system was, it was pretty versatile. I can definitely see some of the advantages of that. So let's talk about that in itself for a minute, because you had a whole rack of these printers, and you had been doing that probably since, those Oki Data printers were pretty state of the art.
We started doing, I even cringe to say it, DocuDose packaging in the mid-90s when we identified that with the mental health patient population, they had a real struggle with medication adherence. So we were doing that for 20 plus years of using those Oki Datas and printing the DocuDose bags.
Yeah, which is a really great way to step into the adherence packaging realm. It prints directly from software. But yeah, the printers are definitely a bit of a throwback. So what did you end up moving to?
SynMed.
SynMed, yeah.
And the reason is we wanted the flexibility, and that was the automation that provided us the most flexibility. It can do 40, I believe, different packaging styles. And right now we use 3 different packaging styles. We use Dispill for some patients. We use the 30-day cards for some of our group homes, and then we use the multi-dose cards for the majority of our patients. But that one piece of automation, by just switching the trays, gives us the capability to produce those 3 different cards.
Nice. It's always interesting to hear, which specific device has worked best based on your needs, because obviously, a different automation solution may be better for somebody else or better for you. So it's always great to kind of hear specifically why that was a great tool.
And what I wanted to look at too is the competitive landscape. What was going to differentiate us in the market compared to our other players? All the other competitors in our area are using pouch systems. So I wanted to use a different type of solution that would make us stand out compared to our competitors.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if everybody was using, pouches, just, providing the same service in a different format, maybe enough to make it noticeable, to make it stand out. And that's probably something that most pharmacies don't consider when they're looking at automation, is what is everyone around me doing? And, can that in itself be a way to stand out?
Right.
So so is that all still downstairs?
Oh, no.
No?
No. Downstairs is pretty much it. We expanded the employee break area, have just 2 desks back there. Everything's upstairs now. So we've really made it, try to make it an employee-friendly environment for the staff. And I think we've accomplished it. Open space so we can reconfigure, put a lot of thought into how we design the space so that as technology changes, we can reconfigure the space if need be.
Nice. Good thinking. Yeah, I remember a couple tight passageways over there where the single dose machine was. And yeah.
Oh yeah.
So as you're growing these different programs, obviously you've got to have a strong team. At what point did you make the decision, hey, we need to not only expand this building, that seems like a pretty easy step to make. But at what point did you say, yeah, let's move outside these walls and let's open another pharmacy of some type?
Well, over the years, we've had upwards to 5 pharmacies at different locations. So we've been in and out of market depending on the opportunities. My father had a pharmacy in downtown Akron in the 70s. So when I was in high school, I think that's where I got my first exposure to people with severe mental illness, because they lived right down the street. So they'd come in, they'd buy their lottery tickets, unfortunately buy their cigarettes, get their prescriptions filled. So I started interacting, with the mental health population at an early age, didn't think twice of it. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have that stigma and fear. So I think that set me up for part of the joy I have in my career is helping to make a difference. But like I said, we've been in multiple different locations over the years based on the opportunities. And sometimes those opportunities go away. So we've had to close those locations over the years. For me personally, at this point in career, I find 3 is the max number of pharmacies that I can manage. Other people can manage more than that. But yeah, I think at 3 or more than 3, you start having to have other infrastructure needs. And at this point in my career, I'm really not interested in that.
Yeah, for sure. So are you guys running a central office scenario where you can kind of share records?
Yes. It was imperative. So when we were evaluating pharmacy softwares, that was one of the key decisions. And just like you came to Klein's, we went actually down to Shreveport to see Pioneer's offices, and that was a wonderful experience, and got to meet people and interact with them and get a better understanding of how Pioneer works. And central office was critical in that decision.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of the same faces you saw back then are probably still here. So it is kind of neat. We're actually moving to a beautiful new office here in Shreveport area, and then now we have the Irving as well. So yeah, similar. So as you've grown into those new opportunities, seeing an opportunity and saying yes, let's do it. Takes one skill set. I think another skill set is maybe saying, hey, it's time to rein this one in and loop back for the next. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think that's part of success, is understanding each of those.
Right. we had this opportunity in downtown Akron where Medical Mutual was in the provider business. So they had staff HMO model. They were getting out of the staff HMO model. They also had a pharmacy in the building. Well, they were getting out of it. They wanted to divest out of the pharmacy. They said, you want to come into the pharmacy? The doctors are staying. They're not going to be staff HMO. The hospital's taking them over. Okay, sounds like a great opportunity, low cost of entry. Went in, started doing great. Well, that location morphed over time. The providers came and went. And at one point in time, there were no providers left in the building.
Oh, wow.
Because the hospital de-emphasized that location. You know, they had IT in what was our large provider office. So at that point in time, it just made sense, you know, had to close that location. And that was right in 2017 when the reimbursement was horrible. You know, it was a difficult decision because I knew we were meeting a need in that community, but unfortunately, financially, we couldn't continue to meet that need. And if they added physicians back to it, would there be an opportunity? I don't know. But can't look back. You just have to learn from it and have to look forward.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, there's so many different things. I started just kind of going through a list of some of the opportunities that you've taken. You know, immunizations we've talked about, embracing the adherence packaging. So working both for retail adherence packaging as well, or just for the closed door?
Well, if we get a patient in our retail location that is struggling to manage their medications, we refer them to the closed door pharmacy, and it's essentially medical at home at that point in time because we're providing MARS type information, medication administration records, so that family members can help manage that patient's meds with not a whole lot of individual involvement.
Sure. So are you doing all of your compounding there at the original location now as well?
Yes. So when we were doing all the remodel to add the closed door pharmacy, had to add a bathroom, had to do some HVAC work. So the general contractor we were working with said, you know what, Barry, I know you didn't want to do the compound lab right now. It just makes sense because we're going to have the trades out here. We're going to have the plumbers, the HVAC people. Let's just do it all at once. So we did that and, you know, tore up that whole area at one point in time. It was a challenge during going through it, but I'm glad we did at that point in time.
Yeah, for sure. So what kind of compounding are you guys doing primarily?
We do all non-sterile compounding. Main focus right now, we're trying to differentiate more, is we're very heavily in pain creams because that has been, with the opioid issues, that's been an alternative that have given patients a lot of relief. So we have done that. Women's health is an area we're trying to expand more into. We have some, but it's just not as predominant. And we do vet, but not significant amount of vet as well. So those are our big segments of our compound business.
Yeah. So again, is it Barry going out to all of these different physicians and trying to grow those relationships, or have you kind of brought in other team members to help manage those opportunities?
Yeah, other team members, without a doubt. Like I said, at this point, I don't want to emphasize myself. I want to emphasize what Klein's means, but not me as the person. I want to keep the legacy going of what we've set up in our community, and people just think of Klein's, not of me. And I think that's the case right now, and I'm very proud of that. So.
Yeah. Almost when they walk in, they see your name tag and they're like, "Oh, any relation?"
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really cool to have, you know, those members of your team that are also that ingrained and you know that much of a fixture in the pharmacy.
Right. You know, you hear about culture, and that's really something that we work on and we're continuing to work on, is, you know, what are our values? What are we trying to do? And making sure at the start when we're hiring somebody Do they understand what their role is and what we're trying to accomplish? And then if they buy in with that, it's much easier going forward and continuing that.
Yeah, it's the old Simon Sinek adage, start with why.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you understand the why, the whats make a lot more sense sometimes. So
right. And I guess I'm fortunate because the why, my why is pretty easy. And I used to joke about this when we were in pharmacy school. My goal was save lives and stomp out diseases. But to a certain extent, that's what I've been able to do for my career, is I've really been able to help people improve their wellness. So I've met my why, and I think that's why 30 years later, I'm still so passionate about it.
Yeah, that's such a different version of what a pharmacist is than somebody who dispenses medication.
Right.
So that's when you have that kind of mentality, you can see where you're going to identify those opportunities and keep moving forward.
Right.
So we talked a little bit about COVID. The last year has been pretty interesting in Ohio with, like you said, provider status, some of the changes that COVID brought into, just how we all had to adapt. So curbside was something that a lot of people introduced that maybe they hadn't done before. A lot of pharmacies maybe started, their first point of care testing, their first immunizations. What do you see coming out of the last 2 years that is a positive that you want to roll forward?
Well, to your point of curbside, why in the world were we not doing curbside before? I have no idea. And the staff love it. The patients love it. So why weren't we doing it? Why did this event prompt us to finally come up with that solution? That's the thing that I constantly talk to the staff about. Let's not have one of those opportunities. Let's look forward and say, how can we fix this now without having to be pushed to do it? Because we were pushed to do it, and we should have done it a long time ago. Our building's not configured for a drive-through by any stretch of the imagination, but it was an amazing opportunity. To your point, then we started doing curbside testing. It's just opened up the Pandora's box of different opportunities that we could do. And what are those other unsolved problems we have right now that we just need to have a little out of the box thinking to come up with a solution?
Yeah. And it really comes down to, that efficiency that enables the next opportunity. One of the things that our developers were able to do during COVID is really, pivot and provide tools to, okay, with that in mind, if you're going to meet the patient at their car, what needs to happen? You need to have their complete order together. So you need that kind of appointment-based model. You need MedSync. You need to be able to communicate efficiently with the patient via text. You need to maybe even the bagging system that we released, where you can just have everything in the bag with one barcode, and really maximize that point of sale checkout. The over-the-counter medications being included in their sync, but all of those little things, once you have all of those efficiencies in that appointment-based model, okay, now what can you do with that?
And trying to leverage all that with some of the other metrics that we're trying to do. Like you speak about MedSync. If we didn't have a strong MedSync program, it would have been hellish in the pharmacy. But we had developed our MedSync program to the point where it was working well. But now I look at the next level of how do we leverage that with our DIR fees? And I'm late to the game, I'll admit it. We're going to be really targeting in 2022 how to improve our DIR fees. I talked to another pioneer, Rich Mace out of West Virginia, and he built into his Pioneer system to really target his outliers. So we're going to do that the same starting now. We're building it in now. So come 2022, we're ready to roll with it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things your team has done well is let the software kind of share that logic. I mean, your team's built out quite a few different categories and then triggers that provide those workflow alerts when those specific scenarios happen. But yeah, you have to leverage your technology because you're not going to identify those every time or even most of the time if you're looking at it.
And you don't want to have alert fatigue. And that's where we've got to be very strategic about those alerts and making sure that they're happening at the right time for the right patients and we can have the right intervention.
Yeah, for sure. So where do you see where do you see that going forward? Are you guys making home deliveries now or?
Yeah, and you talk about over my course of my career, that was one of my jobs as well when I was younger, was I was the delivery boy. But we do quite a few between the two locations in Cuyahoga Falls. We're doing 100 to 120 deliveries Monday through Friday every day. So,
wow.
And once again, leveraging the technology with the iPads and the delivery signature capture has streamlined that, give us a lot of audit protection, making sure that we have those signatures. But, that presents some other challenges when you start talking about those interventions. If a person has transportation issues, how do you get them into the pharmacy to get a vaccination, to do an MTM? We do them telephonically all the time, but really get some eyes on these patients is always valuable.
Yeah, one of our early podcasts, we had Joe Williams on, who was just telling me a story about a delivery where he noticed there was like a tree limb, that was low hanging and it was blocking the driveway and it was causing mobility issues for that patient, and it's something that would never come up until you meet that patient where they live and really see those, those challenges, whether it's a high step or, it could be so many different things.
Right. And that's meeting the patient where they are. When you're having a conversation about a medication, what is their obstacle? And understanding they might not tell you that, but you have to kind of discern that from some of the things that you're hearing from them. And it might not be from that visit, but it might be from those recurring conversations that you have over a period of time.
Yeah. So I guess it was probably 5 years ago. I made it up to Cuyahoga Falls.
Cuyahoga.
I mess it up every time. Also, is it what is the appropriate term? Is it Ohioans?
Yes, Ohioans.
Ohioans. All right. So I made it up there maybe 5 years ago, and we talked. And one of the things that you were focused on 5 years ago was practicing at the top of your license. So it's been 5 years. There's been a lot of changes. The provider status. Where do you see ideally? What's a utopian vision, or maybe a very obtainable vision of services you're providing next year or 2 years from now?
Well, as we brought up previously, it's the payment model needs to evolve. I think there's opportunities. I look at the chronic disease states, and I know from personal experience, my goal is I want to stay well, and I want the doctor to be taking care of, the providers to be taking care of patients when they're not doing well, because they're a stretched resource, and primary care providers are going to get stretched even more as the statistics that I've been reading. So how do we keep patients that say have diabetes, keep them within normal limits so that they're only seeing their provider, once, twice a year for their thorough physical exams? What can we do there? Hypertension, high cholesterol, all those things. How can we keep people well should be our focus. And collaborating with the physicians on those patients and making sure that, we've got the patient as everything's revolving around and not having tunnel vision. I think that has creeped into our medical practice way too much.
Yeah. And that's the really interesting thing to see moving forward. So many pharmacies that are stepping into that medical kind of arena where it's medical billing, and a lot of times you see that happen with the access to the prescriber's EHR. What's really going to be exciting is that future of care planning where all of those codes are disseminated from that standard information packet basically. But yeah, it's really interesting to think about doing that without relying on a prescriber's system.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, right now with the way Ohio Medicaid's collaborative practice agreement, and to bill for any of these services, we have to have a collaborative practice agreement. So you take our patient, a mentally ill patient who also has diabetes, might also have a cardiologist involved. So you could have 3 different providers, psychiatrist, endocrinologist, and a cardiologist treating that patient, plus potentially a pulmonologist for some of our patients. So to be able to bill right now for any of those services, you would have to have a collaborative practice agreements with all of those separate providers, which makes it very challenging.
Yeah. I mean, from the outside, whenever you explain it to somebody outside of pharmacy, when you say, yeah, look, so here's these, 5 major medical professions all writing medications that are, this one's causing side effects, which is causing this medication to be prescribed in the first place. And, and you're really that hub, and the main, and the main picture of billing, you're basically only getting paid for that dispensing. So it's exciting to see that awareness begin to change. I think there's a lot of push out there for more transparency, for higher reimbursements, which is nice, but it's still not really addressing what you're doing every day and where you're really focusing.
Right. I mentioned it earlier. There's so many resources in the community with community pharmacy that we need to leverage that so much more. And in some parts of the country, they have to because it's their only access to any type of medical care there is.
Yeah, that's been one of the it's interesting how many different types of community pharmacies there are. But as an installer, by far, I spent way more time in those kind of rural areas where that pharmacy is such an important hub for community, for medications, but also that first line of before I drive 30 miles, to I'm going to go talk to this medical professional. I was actually in a pharmacy visiting somebody, and a customer walked in with their hand all bandaged up. They said, "Hey, do you think this needs stitches?" And I was like, "Wow, okay."
It's like everything, Will. It's about the relationship, and they have a relationship with that pharmacist. They value that relationship, and depending on what needs to be done, if the pharmacist says this is what I need to do, a lot of times that's what we'll do. And that's where I want to make sure going forward, Klein's is always has that relationship with those patients that they feel comfortable coming in and ask us those questions.
Yeah, because you guys are not necessarily in a small town. Like that's a good sized town.
Right. Yeah. Cuyahoga Falls, 50,000, and we're adjacent to Akron, which is, a couple 100,000.
Yeah. And still I remember a very, neighborhood feel, which I really enjoyed in your pharmacy there.
Oh, it's a very nice community.
Yeah. So, what other opportunities do you see down the road? Are you going to have a fourth location, or are you going to keep it at 3? Or if you did, even theoretically, what might you pursue? I'm always interested.
Honestly, it's like I said earlier, 3 locations seems to be the sweet spot. Where I can sleep at night, and I want to keep sleeping at night. It's one of those things that you take for granted until you can't sleep. I just want to, like I said, continue to build out what we are. And I like this phrase, stronger, faster, better. how can we get stronger, faster, better?
Yeah.
How can we do what we do better? And that's leveraging the technology we have and understanding the technology and utilizing the technology to the maximum capability. All along, it's all about that relationship. So how do we build better relationships with the patients, with the providers, with the ancillary services that we interact with?
Yeah, I think that's great, man. Look for those amazing opportunities and focus on the fundamentals.
Right. I'm a big football fan, and you got to block and tackle. You can have a great play, but if you're not blocking and tackling, it's not going to work.
That's awesome. We could probably do like a whole episode of just comparing to football. But when we have that episode, I'm going to send Howland in to argue college ball with you.
I've already taken it to task many times, so I'll be ready for it.
All right, Barry. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks so much for joining us.
And I do want to mention something else here real quick. Will, you bring up Josh. The development team, what they've done for Positive ID, I do greatly appreciate it. I think that's going to take a great deal of administrative burden that presently we have in Ohio away from us, that we're going to be able to focus more on patient care. And I'm excited about that. And that's where we've got to first understand from a regulatory environment what's required, how do we implement that, and then make sure that we're doing it correctly, both to protect ourselves from a regulatory standpoint and to provide the best patient care. But I think, and that's our goal the next 6 weeks, is we're going to be working on implementing that. But I think that's going to free up easily 1 to 2 hours per pharmacy location a day.
Wow. Yeah. So anybody outside of Ohio, the Positive ID is probably not, so much of an issue yet, but we've all seen those biometric scanners that we've implemented early on, and I think that was in part because of the early Ohio biometrics for the ID regulation. So yeah, definitely a concentrated push in that area, but probably something that we'll see across the country and other states eventually as well too. So
sure.
Yeah, always good to see the kind of those states that are leading the way and bringing in those new requirements, those new demands, being able to meet those needs. And then, when it comes to your state, luckily, Ohio already figured it out, or North Carolina already implemented that. And so, yeah. Often it's rapidly changing, much to some of our developments. But I'm
sure they have kind words for the state of Ohio. That's the other thing I'd like to just say is, there's challenges, but then there's opportunities. So how do you focus on it? You focus on the challenge, or you focus on the opportunity. And so what are we going to be doing going forward is, those challenges are going to create opportunities. So finding those opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same ideology with development as well. If we're able to, meet those needs and give the best tools, then perfect. Win-win. Right. So, all right, Barry, thanks so much for joining us. I hope I'm going to see you on the road here before too long as we start to venture back out of our caves again.
Yeah, I can't wait, honestly. So I already have the dates for Nashville conference penciled in. So hopefully we'll see you there and get to learn more.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Barry. I'll let you guys get back to it.
All right. Appreciate it, Will. Good seeing you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Scripts, presented by the Catalyst Pharmacy Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and clicking the notification bell so that you'll be notified anytime we post new content. To stay up to date with all of the latest independent pharmacy news and content, follow PioneerRx on your preferred social media platform.